I'm not used to putting these on.
Yeah, right here.
Okay, okay, all right, here we go.
At almost 70 years old, Fred Funk should be celebrated as one of golf's most accurate players ever. But instead, his legacy is tangled in controversy, injury, and a single remark that nearly destroyed everything. How did a man who defied age and odds become his own downfall? The answer lies in 3 devastating chapters that reveal how even the most resilient competitors can crumble under the weight of time, pain, and public judgment. Fred Funk's story isn't about natural talent or early success. It's about grinding through rejection when everyone else had already made it. Born in 1956 in Tacoma Park, Maryland, Funk took the scenic route to professional golf. And by scenic, I mean brutal. He started at the University of Maryland, but here's the kicker. He got cut from his own college team in 1975. Imagine getting rejected by your own school. Most people would have quit right there. But Funk didn't have that luxury or that self-awareness, apparently. He transferred to Prince George's Community College, then crawled back to Maryland and somehow earned a top spot on the team. After graduating in 1980 with a law enforcement degree, which tells you how confident he was about his golf career, his first job wasn't on a golf course. It was as a circulation supervisor for the Washington Star newspaper. Think about that. While his peers were already competing professionally, Fred Funk was delivering newspapers. This wasn't some romantic underdog story. This was a guy who couldn't catch a break and didn't know when to walk away. He turned pro in 1981 and struggled on the mini tour circuit for years. The mini tours are golf's minor leagues where dreams go to die slowly. While other players his age were making names for themselves on the PGA Tour, Funk was grinding it out in front of dozens of spectators at courses nobody had heard of. The money was terrible, the competition was inconsistent, and the future looked bleak. Then came another detour. From 1982 to 1988, he coached golf at the University of Maryland. 6 years, that's how long it took for him to finally earn his PGA Tour card in 1988, joining the tour full-time in 1989 at age 33. By that age, most successful golfers are already established veterans with multiple wins. Fred Funk was just showing up, but showing up didn't mean succeeding. The 1990 season, his second full year on tour, was a disaster. He struggled with consistency, missing the cut in nearly half the tournaments he entered. Nearly half. That means every other week, he wasn't even good enough to play the weekend. The guy was fighting just to survive, scraping together whatever money he could from the few tournaments where he did make the cut. A third-place finish at the Chattanooga Classic earned him $34,000. A fifth at the Buick Open brought in $40,000. These weren't victories. They were participation trophies keeping his career on life support. The truth is, 1990 should have been the end. Most players facing that level of failure would have reconsidered their life choices. But Funk kept grinding, kept showing up, kept believing he belonged even when the results said otherwise. It's admirable in a way, but it's also stubborn to the point of delusion. After another year of development in 1991, his persistence finally broke through. In 1992, at the Shell Houston Open, Funk captured his first PGA Tour victory. He was in his mid-30s. Most players his age were worried about declining skills. Fred Funk was just getting started, which says more about how late he arrived than how great he was. But here's where Funk gets interesting. He wasn't just late to the party. He was fundamentally different from everyone else at the party. In an era of increasing power where bombers were launching drives 300 yards, Funk was one of the shortest hitters on tour. He couldn't compete with raw distance, so he built his entire game around accuracy. He became known as an accuracy over distance guy who practically owned the tour's driving accuracy statistic. He officially led the PGA Tour in driving accuracy in 1995, 1996, 1999, 2000, and 2003. He had a quote that perfectly captured his entire existence. "I'm a Volkswagen in a field of Ferraris." That's not humility, that's reality. He acknowledged that on certain courses like Augusta National, it was just about impossible for him to compete against the Bombers. His success depended entirely on tactical precision and finding courses where his Volkswagen could outmaneuver the Ferraris. This wasn't strategy, it was survival. He had to cherry-pick tournaments where length wasn't the deciding factor, where narrow fairways and challenging greens rewarded accuracy over power. He was constantly playing defense, never offense. Stories like Fred Funk's remind us how public perception can shift in an instant, sometimes unfairly, sometimes deservedly. What do you think? Did the media overreact to what happened next, or was Funk out of line? Drop your thoughts below and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into forgotten sports legacies. Everything came together in 2005 at the Players' Championship. This was Fred Funk's signature win, the single greatest validation of his entire methodology. At 48 years, 9 months, and 14 days old, he became the oldest winner in the tournament's history. But this wasn't a smooth, dominant victory. The tournament was ravaged by weather delays, forcing a marathon Monday finish. Funk, who began the final round 4 strokes behind leader Luke Donald, had to play 32 grueling holes on that final day just to complete the tournament. The conditions on Monday were brutal. Crystal blue skies, sure, but also 42-mile-per-hour gusts. The wind was so fierce it neutralized the Ferraris. Suddenly, power became a liability. The field average in the final round ballooned to a staggering 76.12. That's more than 4 strokes over par. Meanwhile, Funk shot a 71, a masterpiece of control. His lower ball trajectory proved to be a massive advantage, allowing him to lead the field in both fairways and greens in regulation. He won by a single stroke after making a clutch 5-foot putt to save par on the 18th hole. This wasn't a feel-good story about an old-timer getting lucky. It was a strategic triumph. Fred Funk didn't win in spite of being a short hitter. He won because he was the single best precision player in the field on a day when precision was the only thing that mattered. For one perfect day, the Volkswagen beat every Ferrari on the road. It was vindication for every missed cut, every failure, every moment of doubt. It proved his entire philosophy was valid, at least for that one day. But here's the tragic irony. Fred Funk reached his career zenith at 48, and he was afforded almost no time to enjoy it. His body began to betray him almost immediately. He joined the PGA Tour Champions in 2006, but major health issues started the moment he turned 50. By 2013, he admitted he had been fighting injury since 2007. What should have been his victory lap became a war against his own deteriorating body. The years that should have been about cashing checks and enjoying senior tour life turned into a medical nightmare. The focal point of his suffering was his right knee. During the 2008 and 2009 seasons, his condition deteriorated from a chronic issue into a full medical crisis. The pain and swelling became so intense that he had the knee drained 18 separate times. 18 times. Imagine playing professional golf while your knee needs to be drained every few weeks just so you can walk. Every swing was agony. Every tournament was a question of whether his body would hold together long enough to finish. Then it got worse. He developed a staph infection in the joint, a serious and dangerous complication that left him unsure whether he could even play in the 2009 U.S. Senior Open. Staph infections in joints are no joke. They can lead to sepsis, permanent damage, even death if not treated properly. The fact that he was even considering playing golf shows either incredible courage or incredible stupidity. But in a final, extraordinary display of grit, he did play. And he pretty much dominated the field to win that major championship. That victory, however, was the last stand for his natural knee. The pain became unbearable. In November 2009, his career was officially halted. He underwent a total knee replacement of his right knee. For a lifelong competitor like Funk, the true tragedy wasn't just the physical pain, it was the psychological toll of facing his own athletic mortality. In a vulnerable moment, he articulated this fear perfectly. "I love to compete, but I also can see the end of the tunnel now. The dark side of it where I won't be able to play anymore." He described his frustration, stating, "I feel like I can still play when I'm healthy, but I just haven't been healthy for a while now." This is where the tragedy becomes truly painful. Fred Funk spent his entire life fighting to prove he belonged. He ground his way onto the PGA Tour. He adapted his game to compete against superior athletes. He won the Players' Championship at 48. And just when he should have been enjoying the fruits of all that labor, his own body turned against him. The very thing that made him a professional golfer, his ability to physically compete, was being stripped away piece by piece. His recovery was as much mental as physical. He credited his wife, Sharon, as incredibly strong, working on him to give things up to the Lord to relieve the immense stress. His measures for success were recalibrated. After one tournament, he was most pleased that he had walked without a limp for 3 days. Not that he played well, that he walked without a limp. This is what Fred Funk had been reduced to. A man who once won the Players' Championship was now celebrating the ability to walk like a normal human being. He also sought regenerative stem cell therapy for tendonitis and a shoulder injury. His body was falling apart piece by piece, and this physical collapse provides essential context for what happened next. In 2017, Fred Funk made a comment that would overshadow everything he had accomplished. It was at a press conference during the Senior PGA Championship at Trump National Golf Club in Virginia. While joking about his competitive struggles on lengthening courses, Funk stated, "I feel like I should be on the ladies' tour right now." He immediately caught himself and added context. "I didn't mean that in a derogatory sense, not at all. Just because Annika Sorenstam outdrove me, I'm a little bitter, but no. Too late. USA." Today sports columnist Christine Brennan wrote a column about the event titled, "Senior PGA Players Are Trump's Kind of Crowd." The column noted that Funk was wearing a shirt with the Trump name over his heart. Brennan described Funk's unprompted remark as blatantly sexist. She wrote, "It was fascinating that those blatantly sexist words came so easily to him. They tumbled off his tongue as if he had said them 100 times before. Perhaps this was the first time, but it sure didn't sound like it." Funk responded days later with a detailed rebuttal published in Morning Read. He called Brennan's column a hatchet job and stated he was perplexed and angry at being portrayed as sexist. He accused Brennan of having a premeditated agenda, writing, "Her whole goal is to take down Trump and anyone who supports him." Funk was livid that Brennan created an image as if he was a man who disrespects Annika and the LPGA. He stated his position unequivocally. "My comment was about me being short and being outdriven by Annika. That is not sexist." But here's the critical piece of context that makes or breaks this entire controversy. Funk's 2017 rebuttal was based entirely on a specific event from 12 years earlier that he assumed was common knowledge. Without this context, his 2017 comment is indefensible. With it, the intent becomes crystal clear. During the 2005 Skins game in La Quinta, California, the 49-year-old Funk was in a group with LPGA superstar Annika Sorenstam. As a known good sport, Funk had previously told Sorenstam that if she ever outdrove him, he would wear a skirt for an entire hole. On the third hole, Sorenstam's drive traveled 278 yards, 7 yards past Funk's tee shot. True to his word, Sorenstam produced a flowered skirt, and Funk, to the delight of the crowd and his playing partners, put it on over his pants and played the remainder of the hole. This 2005 event was the entire basis for his 2017 remark. He claimed in his rebuttal that this was the story he was referencing, and that every woman on the LPGA who knows him and the story would support him 100%. But Brennan either didn't know this context or chose to ignore it. She stood by her column, defending her reporting as Journalism 101, given that Funk was wearing a Trump logo. She did not acknowledge the 2005 Skins game context, focusing instead on the language of the comment itself. His comment about the ladies' tour, which was unprompted, was surprising. By any definition, that is a sexist comment. It's an important conversation. The controversy quickly escalated. Funk's son, Taylor Funk, then a golfer at the University of Texas, immediately took to Twitter to defend his father, writing directly to Brennan, "I'm sorry, Ms. Brennan, but there is one thing my dad is not, and it is sexist. The fact you think those comments are sexist is beyond me." But Brennan refused to back down. The battle lines were drawn. Funk and his family on one side, claiming misrepresentation and missing context. Brennan and her supporters on the other, arguing that intent doesn't matter when the words themselves are harmful. This incident is a perfect case study in context collapse. Funk made a self-deprecating inside joke referencing a specific event from over a decade earlier. Brennan interpreted the remark literally as a blatantly sexist statement, implying the ladies' tour is inherently inferior. The presence of the Trump logo acted as a political accelerant, placing the remark within the highly polarized cultural atmosphere of 2017. The controversy reveals a fundamental clash. Funk was arguing about his intent and his personal history of respect with Sorenstam. Brennan was arguing about the text and its public implication, that the very phrase ladies' tour, when used as a punchline for being short, is sexist by definition, regardless of the speaker's intent. Fred Funk didn't set out to destroy his career, but between his body giving out and his words being weaponized, he managed to do it anyway. The three distinct narrative threads of his career are not separate. They're interwoven, held together by a single defining characteristic, a grinder mentality. His late bloomer status was a decade-long grind against mediocrity. His tragedy was a grueling private grind against his own mortality. His controversy was a public grind against a media narrative that he felt distorted his character. In all three instances, his response was the same: to dig in, to fight, and to endure. Even today, his persistence is evident. He made a PGA Tour cut at the Bermuda Championship at age 64 and, as of 2024, remains one of the most accurate drivers in professional golf. He still led the tour in driving accuracy in 2017, the 2020-21 combined season, and 2024. The Volkswagen is still running somehow against all odds. Fred Funk's career is not a story of effortless dominance, but of relentless resilience. He was the short hitter in the land of long hitters. He was the late bloomer among the prodigies. He was the injured veteran fighting the dark side of his own compromised body. And in 2017, he was the old school player whose humor and history collided with the new school media landscape. Every step of his journey was uphill. Every victory came at a cost. Fred Funk didn't just lose to time. He lost to a game, a culture, and a world that changed faster than he could. Yet somehow he's still out there, fairway after fairway, proving he hasn't given up. Do legends like Funk deserve redemption, or did he bring this on himself? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the athletes time forgot.
Why is golf so humorous?
Because it's a great humbler. It's the only sport that you never ever conquer. If you play golf for the first time, it looks easy, just a little white ball, whack it around, it's stationary. And then the more you play, the more obsessed you get to it. Doesn't matter how high your level gets.
Frank Nobilo looked like he had it all figured out. A world ranking of 21, wins across multiple tours, and a spot representing the international team at the President's Cup. But by age 43, his career was over, and he was left feeling one thing above all else: furious. The game game didn't just walk away from him, his body did. And when he talks about those final years, the anger still comes through. He felt the PGA Tour, the sport he loved, had taken everything from him before he was ready to let go. Frank Nobilo was born in New Zealand in 1960, and by the mid-1990s, he'd carved out a reputation as one of the most consistent international players on tour. He racked up 14 professional wins around the world, including 5 on the European Tour and 1 on the PGA Tour. In July 1997, he hit his career peak, sitting at number 21 in the world rankings. He was a 3-time President's Cup player, competing in 1994, 1996, and 1998. Everything pointed to more years at the top, but beneath that success, his body was already breaking down in ways he couldn't control. Frank's career didn't end because of age or a loss of skill. It ended because 4 separate health crises attacked his body at once, and they all fed into each other like a perfect storm of physical destruction. The first problem started the day he was born. Frank came into this world with his right leg shorter than his left. It's called leg length discrepancy, and in most people, it's just a minor annoyance. But when you're swinging a golf club with the force and rotation of a professional athlete, that small difference becomes a massive issue. Every time Frank swung, his body had to compensate. His pelvis tilted to keep his shoulders level. His spine twisted unevenly to maintain balance. And with every swing, one side of his lower back absorbed more stress than the other. Think about what that means over the course of a professional career. Frank wasn't just swinging a club casually on weekends.
He was hitting hundreds of balls every single day. Practice swings, tournament rounds, range sessions, all of it added up. Each swing generated forces up to 8 times his body weight, all concentrated through a spine that was already working at a structural disadvantage. The asymmetry meant that, while one side of his lumbar spine was handling the load it was designed for, the other side was being punished beyond its capacity. Year after year, decade after decade, this pattern wore down the discs and vertebrae on one side faster than the other. For years, this went unnoticed by fans and even by Frank himself, but inside, his spine was wearing down faster than it should have. The uneven load didn't just cause soreness, it set the stage for what would eventually become a career-ending mechanical failure in his lower back. If you're already thinking that sounds bad, it gets worse. In 1998, just 1 week after marrying his wife Selena, Frank was at the Lake Nona Golf and Country Club in Central Florida. An errant tee shot came flying in and struck him directly above his left eye. The impact was brutal. It took 30 stitches to close the wound. For most people, that kind of injury would mean a few weeks of recovery and maybe a scar. But for a professional golfer, even a subtle change in vision can ruin everything. Golf is a game of millimeters. Your depth perception, your ability to track the ball, your spatial judgment, all of it has to be perfect. When you're standing over a putt, you're reading breaks that might only be an inch or two over 10 feet. When you're hitting an approach shot, you're judging distances down to the yard. Any disruption to your visual system, even something as small as a slight change in how your eyes work together, can throw off your entire game. After the injury, Frank's play was affected. He never quite returned to the form he'd shown in 1997. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. Which of these early health problems do you think was the most shocking? The fact that he was born with uneven legs, or that he took 30 stitches to the face just days after getting married? Drop a comment below and make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this story only gets more intense from here. By 2002, the back problems that had been building for Frank's entire career finally reached a breaking point. He was dealing with severe pain in his lower spine, specifically in the L3, L4, and L5 vertebrae. Medical imaging later showed that the discs between these bones were almost completely gone. Frank described it himself, saying the vertebrae were almost touching each other with virtually no disc left. Imagine the cushioning in your spine just disappearing. Every movement, every twist, every attempt to generate power in a golf swing became agony. To understand how catastrophic this was, you need to understand what those discs do. The intervertebral discs are like shock absorbers between each bone in your spine. They allow your spine to bend, twist, and compress without the bones grinding against each other. When those discs degenerate and collapse, you lose that protection. Bone starts rubbing on bone. The space where nerves exit the spinal cord gets narrower and narrower until those nerves get pinched. That's exactly what happened to Frank. The pain didn't stay in his back either. It shot down both legs in what's called radiculopathy, a condition where compressed nerves send sharp electric pain through your limbs. This wasn't a dull ache. This was shooting, stabbing pain that would
would strike without warning. Imagine trying to maintain your balance through a golf swing while lightning bolts of agony are firing down your legs. The lower lumbar spine, especially L3 through L5, is absolutely critical for golf. These segments allow you to rotate your hips and shoulders independently, to maintain your posture throughout the swing,
and to transfer power from your lower body up through your torso and into your arms. When those segments fail, your entire kinematic chain breaks down. You can't generate speed, you can't maintain consistency, and most importantly, you can't do it without excruciating pain. Frank lost his PGA Tour card that season. He was seriously considering immediate retirement, and he made it clear that surgery was only going to be a last resort. The back injury alone was devastating, but it wasn't even the worst part. The real killer, the thing that ultimately made it impossible for Frank to continue playing professional golf, was inflammatory arthritis. In 1997, the same year he hit his career-high ranking, Frank was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. After going to the Mayo Clinic for further evaluation, doctors refined the diagnosis to inflammatory monoarthritis. This wasn't just sore joints after a long round. This was a systemic autoimmune disease that specifically attacked the parts of his body he needed most: his wrists, his elbows, and his shoulders. Rheumatoid arthritis is a disease where your immune system mistakenly attacks your own joints. It causes inflammation that leads to swelling, pain, and eventually destruction of the cartilage and bone within the joint. Unlike regular wear and tear arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis is unpredictable and progressive. It comes in waves. You might feel relatively normal for days or weeks, and then suddenly wake up with joints so swollen and painful you can barely move. Frank vividly described how his wrist would blow up during flare-ups, swelling so badly he couldn't grip a club properly. And in golf, your grip is everything. The connection between your hands and the club is where all the feedback happens. You feel the weight of the club head. You sense the position of the club face. You control the speed and path of the swing through subtle adjustments in grip pressure. When your wrists are inflamed, swollen, and painful, you lose all of that. If you can't control the pressure in your hands, if your wrists can't stabilize the club face through impact, if your elbows can't absorb the shock of hitting the ball, you simply can't play at an elite level. It doesn't matter how good your swing mechanics are or how strong your legs are. Without stable, pain-free hands and wrists, the game is over. And that's exactly where Frank found himself. Frank admitted that his condition got worse even with medication. The arthritis was unpredictable. Some days, he'd pick up a club and feel fine, almost normal. He'd think maybe he could push through, maybe he could find a way back. But then, just days later, he couldn't move. The flare-ups came and went without warning, creating this brutal cycle of hope and despair. That psychological toll was almost as bad as the physical pain. Frank has spoken openly about the anger and resentment he felt during this time. He went through what he called all the why me stuff, the frustration of losing control over his own body, the bitterness of being forced out of a career he wasn't ready to leave. He described having chunks of time he couldn't fill, moments where the reality of his situation just crushed him. By 2002, Frank's body wasn't just dealing with one major problem. It was dealing with all of them at the same time. He had a congenital defect in his leg that had been stressing his spine for decades. He had a back injury so severe that the bones in his lower spine were nearly touching. He had inflammatory arthritis attacking the joints in his hands, wrists, and elbows. And he still had whatever lingering effects remained from that ocular injury in 1998. This wasn't just bad luck. This was a multi-system failure. His core, the engine of his golf swing, was compromised by the collapsed discs. His control system, the hands and wrists that dictate every shot, was under constant attack from inflammation. And his body's structural foundation had been flawed from birth. All of these things fed into each other, accelerating his decline. The back injury made it harder to generate power, which put more strain on his arms and wrists. The arthritis made it harder to stabilize the club, which put more torque on his already damaged spine. Everything was connected, and everything was failing. What makes Frank's situation particularly tragic is that each condition made the others worse. When his back hurt, he tried to compensate by using more arm and hand action in his swing, but that only put more stress on joints already being destroyed by arthritis. When his wrists flared up, he tried to generate more power from his core rotation, but that only accelerated the degeneration in his already compromised spine. He was trapped in a vicious cycle, where any attempt to work around one problem only made another problem worse. There was no escape, no way to adapt his technique enough to overcome overcome all four issues at once. In 2003, at just 43 years old, Frank Nobilo was forced to retire from professional golf. The decision wasn't voluntary. It wasn't a graceful exit. It was a forced surrender to a body that could no longer meet the demands of elite competition. He lost his PGA Tour card. He lost his ability to compete at the highest level. And most painfully, he lost the career he had worked his entire life to build. Frank has been open about how angry and resentful he felt. He didn't want to stop. He felt like the tour, the game, his own body had all conspired to take something away from him that he wasn't ready to give up. The timing made it even more bitter. At 43, Frank wasn't old by golf standards. His mind was still sharp. His strategic understanding of the game was better than ever. He had decades of experience that gave him an edge over younger players. But none of that mattered when his body refused to cooperate. Golf is unforgiving in that way. You can have all the knowledge,
All the mental toughness, all the competitive fire in the world. But if your body can't execute, you're done. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Years after retiring, Frank sought treatment for his chronic back pain. He eventually tried a non-surgical spinal decompression treatment using a technology called the DRX 9000. The results were remarkable. Frank reported that he could swing a golf club again completely pain-free. He said the treatment made his life totally different and restored physical abilities he thought were gone forever. This is a critical point. The spinal injury, as severe as it was, turned out to be treatable. With the right intervention, Frank could have managed the back pain and possibly continued playing. But the arthritis, that was a different story. Inflammatory arthritis doesn't have a cure. It's a chronic, progressive disease that destroys joints over time. Even if Frank's back had been perfect, even if he'd never had the leg length discrepancy or the eye injury, the arthritis alone would have ended his career. The back injury was the loudest, most painful crisis, but the arthritis was the silent, irreversible barrier that truly made a return to professional golf impossible. So what happened next? Frank didn't disappear. He transitioned into a media career, becoming an analyst for the Golf Channel and CBS Sports. This move was more than just a career change. It was a form of health accommodation. As a television analyst, Frank could stay connected to the sport he loved without putting his body through the physical punishment of competitive golf. He didn't have to walk 18 holes in the heat. He didn't have to twist his spine with explosive rotational force hundreds of times a week. He could sit in a broadcast booth, use his deep knowledge of the game, and avoid aggravating the very conditions that ended his playing career. It was a smart,
strategic adaptation that allowed him to remain relevant in golf while protecting what was left of his physical health. And Frank has thrived in this role. His insights are valued by viewers and respected by players. He brings a perspective that only someone who has competed at the highest level can offer. He understands the pressure, the physical demands, the mental challenges that players face. And ironically, the very health problems that ended his playing career made him uniquely qualified to discuss the physical toll that golf takes on the body. He's lived it. He knows what it's like when your body betrays you. Frank Nobilo's story isn't just about one injury or one bad break. It's about how multiple, interconnected health crises can destroy an elite athletic career. He was born with a structural flaw he couldn't control. He suffered a traumatic injury at the worst possible time. He developed a degenerative spinal condition accelerated by decades of compensating for that structural flaw. And he was struck by a systemic autoimmune disease that specifically targeted the joints he needed most. Any one of these problems would have been difficult. Together, they were insurmountable. His career didn't end because he got old or lost his skills. It ended because his body gave out, piece by piece, system by system, until there was nothing left that could sustain the demands of professional golf. At 65 years old today, Frank likely still manages the long-term effects of his arthritis and spinal issues. He's made peace with what happened, but the anger and resentment from those final years have never fully disappeared. He felt like the game took something from him before he was ready, and in many ways it did. But his transition into broadcasting has been a success, proving that even when your body fails you, there are other ways to stay in the game. Frank Nobilo's story is a reminder of how fragile elite athletic careers really are, and how quickly everything can fall apart when your body turns against you. If his story moved you or taught you something new, make sure to leave a comment and subscribe. This is the reality behind the glory, and Frank lived through every painful moment of it.
It's such a passive game.
He surrenders. Dude, when he gets in here, pat him on the back, say congratulations, enjoy it, and tell him not to serve fried chicken next year. Got it.
He keeps making this funny move. This went on for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes.
The tragic fate of Fuzzy Zoeller before the fall. Before the single comment that would rewrite his legacy, Frank Urban Fuzzy Zoeller was one of professional golf's most cherished figures. In an era of intense competitors, he was a breath of fresh air. The happy-go-lucky player from southern Indiana brought natural charisma to every course he played. He was a gallery favorite who whistled his way down the fairways of the world's most demanding courses. This wasn't an act, it was authentic. He was, in every sense, the people's champion. One moment cemented this image forever. During the 1984 U.S. Open at Winged Foot, Zoeller stood in the 18th fairway, tied for the lead. His rival Greg Norman faced an impossible 45-foot putt to save par. When Norman miraculously holed it, Zoeller grabbed a white towel from his bag and waved it in mock surrender. The act was perfect. It showed grace, humor, and calm under major championship pressure. When Zoeller dominated the playoff the next day, Norman returned the gesture. The white towel became Zoeller's trademark, a symbol of sportsmanship that defined his career. His character was recognized by golf's highest authorities. In 1985, the United States Golf Association gave him the Bob Jones Award for distinguished sportsmanship. He joined legends like Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. He was the opposite of stuffy country club culture. He was relatable, charming, a two-sport man from New Albany, Indiana who made golf feel accessible, yet within this celebrated persona lay the seeds of its own destruction. His identity was built on being a jokester. His quips and barbs were part of the package. He told Craig Stadler his shoes looked like they came from a Buster Brown fire sale. People laughed. This reputation gave him latitude. His words weren't examined as closely as others. He operated without a filter. When he later defended his most infamous remarks by saying, "Anybody who knows me knows I am a jokester," he was leaning on a persona society no longer accepted as an excuse. The tragic irony is simple. The character trait that made him beloved became the fatal flaw that ensured his tragic downfall. But how did the man who won the highest honor for sportsmanship become a cultural pariah? To understand the fall, you must first understand the heights he reached. In April 1979, Fuzzy Zoeller arrived at Augusta National as a rookie making his first Masters appearance. What followed was one of the most improbable victories in golf history. He started the final round 6 strokes behind the leader. He mounted a comeback to post 8 under par. Then he watched Ed Snead, who held a 3-shot lead with 3 holes to play, bogey all 3 holes. This created a 3-way tie with Zoeller and Tom Watson. It forced the first sudden death playoff in the history of the Masters. On the second playoff hole, Zoeller struck his approach to within 6 feet. After Watson and Snead missed their birdie putts, Zoeller calmly rolled his in. He flung his putter into the air in celebration. He became the first golfer since 1935 to win the Masters on his debut appearance. It is a feat not repeated since the victory was a perfect manifestation of his happy-go-lucky persona. He was the dark horse, the charming outsider who shocked the golf world and walked away with a green jacket. The win announced his arrival on the biggest stage possible. It established him as more than just a talented player. It made him a star with a story that resonated with fans everywhere. It's hard to imagine a more perfect start to a career. Do you remember this era of golf when personalities like Fuzzy ruled the tour? Let us know in the comments. And if you love stories about golf's most legendary players, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. 5 years later, his second major was a display of pure dominance. The 1984 U.S. Open was held at Winged Foot. Famous for its punishing difficulty, battling excruciating back pain, Zoeller engaged in a final round duel with Greg Norman. The tournament ended with Norman's 45-foot par save and Zoeller's white towel gesture. But the playoff the next day was no joke. Zoeller was flawless, firing a 67, the lowest score ever shot in a U.S. Open playoff. Norman crumbled, posting a 75. Zoeller won by 8 strokes. This victory revealed the other side of the coin. The white towel showed the charming jokester. The playoff showed a ruthless competitor capable of dismantling the world's best. This duality was his appeal. The affable showman with a killer instinct. These 2 major championships weren't just trophies. They were defining moments that shaped how the world viewed Fuzzy Zoeller. He had proven himself in the most pressure-packed situations. He had won with style and grace. He had shown he could handle adversity with humor and then deliver when it mattered most. These victories gave him credibility that extended far beyond the golf course. Zoeller's prime was concentrated excellence. All 10 of his PGA Tour victories occurred in just 7 years, from 1979 to 1986. This sustained period of high-level performance placed him firmly among the tour's elite. He wasn't just winning occasionally, he was a consistent presence at the top of leaderboards across the country. He became a star of the skins game, winning back-to-back in 1985 and 1986. His charisma and banter helped elevate the event to one of golf's most popular televised competitions. He wasn't just a great player, he was a bankable entertainer. The skins game format was perfect for him. It rewarded aggressive play and personality. Zoeller had both in abundance. Television audiences loved watching him. He made golf fun. He made it accessible. He proved you didn't have to be stiff and serious to compete at the highest level. This popularity translated to commercial success. He became a highly sought-after pitchman. His most prominent deal was with Kmart. For over 7 years, he endorsed their golf clubs and displayed their logo at tournaments worldwide. The partnership was significant. Kmart was a major American American retailer, having Zoller as their golf ambassador, put his face in front of millions of shoppers. He also had deals with Powerbuilt and Dunlop. These endorsements proved his value extended beyond tournament winnings. Companies wanted to associate their brands with his image. During the 1980s, Fuzzy Zoller was more than a major champion. He was a cultural fixture in golf. He represented a certain kind of American athlete. He was successful but not arrogant. He was skilled but not pretentious. He was competitive but never forgot to smile. This combination made him beloved by fans who saw themselves in him. He was the everyman who happened to be extraordinary at golf. That persona was his greatest asset. It opened doors, it created opportunities, it made him wealthy and famous, but it also created the conditions for his eventual downfall. Then came 1997. The 1997 Masters was a seismic event. Tiger Woods, just 21 years old, wasn't merely winning his first major, he was orchestrating a paradigm shift. His record-shattering 12-stroke victory made him the first person of African-American descent to win a major. It altered the landscape of a sport long defined by exclusivity and racial homogeneity. It was a moment of profound cultural significance, celebrated far beyond golf. Woods represented change, he represented the future, he represented a golf world that would look different from the one that Fuzzy Zoller had known for his entire career. Against this historic backdrop, Fuzzy Zoller made a blunder that would irrevocably alter his life. After finishing in a tie for 34th place, Zoller was approached by a CNN camera crew. They asked him to comment on Woods' performance. His response would become infamous. "He's doing quite well. Pretty impressive," Zoller began. "That little boy is driving well and he's putting well. He's doing everything it takes to win." The patronizing term "little boy" to describe a fellow professional on the verge of history was jarring, but what came next was catastrophic. Referring to the tradition where the defending champion selects the champion's dinner menu, Zoller continued, "So you know what you guys do when he gets in here? You pat him on the back and say congratulations and enjoy it, and tell him not to serve fried chicken next year, got it?" The comment invoked a crude and deeply offensive racial stereotype. The delivery made it worse. Zoller smiled, snapped his fingers, and began walking away before turning back to add, "or collard greens or whatever the hell they serve." The smile, the finger snap, the casual nature of it all suggested a man making a comfortable joke among like-minded company. It wasn't fiery racism, it was something more insidious. The unthinking, casual racism of a man completely oblivious to the cultural weight and historical pain behind his words. What makes this moment even more damning is the context. Tiger Woods had just accomplished something historic. He had broken through barriers that had existed for decades. He had dominated the most prestigious tournament in golf. The world was celebrating, and in that moment of triumph, Zoller chose to reduce him to a racial stereotype. The timing could not have been worse. The comment could not have been more tone-deaf. The incident exposed golf's insular culture. The remarks were made on Sunday but weren't broadcast for a week. This delay became controversial. Media critics questioned why reporters on site failed to report the comments immediately. As the Washington Post wrote, were other reporters saving nice guy Fuzzy from himself? This failure to act suggested a clubby atmosphere where a popular figure was given an implicit pass, or perhaps more disturbing, the press corps itself was so steeped in golf's homogenous culture that they didn't immediately recognize the gravity of the offense. In that moment, Zoller became the unwitting face of golf's uncomfortable reckoning with race. When the comments finally aired, the backlash was swift and severe. The folksy charm that defined his career evaporated overnight. He became the image of a racially insensitive relic. The consequences were immediate. Kmart severed ties almost immediately. The company received a significant volume of angry calls from consumers across the country. They called his remarks inappropriate and offensive. The loss was a major financial blow, erasing a partnership of more than 7 years. This wasn't just about money. It was about reputation. Kmart wanted nothing to do with the controversy. Zoller embarked on a desperate tour of public contrition. His initial statement fell flat. It framed the incident as a joke that was misconstrued. This defense failed to grasp the severity and seemed to blame the audience. As outcry intensified, his posture shifted from defensive to devastated. At a press conference days later, choking back tears, he withdrew from the next tournament. "I'm the one who screwed up and I will pay the price," he said. He vowed not to play again until he could apologize to Tiger Woods personally. PGA Tour Commissioner Tim Fincham officially denounced the comments as inappropriate, unacceptable, and deeply offensive. Some fellow players tried to defend him. Tom Lehman suggested Zoller was attempting to be funny and would have said the same thing to Woods' face. But even these defenses acknowledged the timing and taste were poor. Tiger Woods' response was crucial. He called the humor out of bounds and said he was disappointed. However, he acknowledged Zoller's reputation as a jokester and stated no personal animosity was intended. He accepted the apology and urged everyone to move on. This act of clemency likely saved Zoller from complete and permanent ostracization. Woods showed grace in a moment when he had every right to be furious. His forgiveness allowed Zoller to continue his career, but it couldn't erase what happened. Here's where the narrative shifts. The story that Zoller's racist comments destroyed a thriving career is compelling, but inaccurate. A closer look at his performance reveals a more nuanced and tragic truth. The controversy didn't cause his competitive decline. It provided a grim and permanent explanation for it. It cemented his slide from beloved former champion into a cultural pariah whose best days were already long behind him. Zoller's peak ended more than a decade before the incident. His 10th and final PGA Tour victory came in July 1986. By the 1997 Masters, he was in an 11-year winless drought, while he had a resurgence in 1994, finishing 5th on the money list with over $1 million driven by 5 runner-up finishes. This was an outlier in a broader downward trend. His time as an elite force had passed. The wins had stopped coming. The competitive fire was dimming. The performance data tells the story. In 1997, he earned a meager 134 776 and failed to record a single top 10 finish. By 1998 and 1999, he was missing the cut at the Masters and US Open. His competitive relevance was already gone. The numbers don't lie. He wasn't competing at a high level anymore. The controversy happened during a period of professional vulnerability. It didn't end a thriving career. It simply gave that ending a narrative that would follow him forever. The real tragedy? The controversy didn't destroy his career. It just gave the world a permanent explanation for why it was already over. Without the 1997 incident, Zoller would have faded quietly into retirement. He would have been remembered fondly as a 2-time major champion with a great personality. His decline would have been seen as natural, but the controversy changed everything. It gave people a reason to explain his fall. It transformed a natural decline into a morality tale about consequences. He found some redemption on the Champions Tour. He won the Senior PGA Championship in 2002. He won again at the 2004 MasterCard Championship. These victories added millions to his career earnings. They proved he could still compete against players his own age, but this just made him a star on a secondary tour, forever defined by the scandal. The wins were respectable, they were meaningful, but they couldn't change the narrative. The stain is indelible. When Sergio Garcia made a similar comment in 2013, the media immediately invoked Fuzzy Zoller's name. He had become cultural shorthand for this type of disgrace. His 1997 misstep had become the historical benchmark for racial insensitivity in modern golf. He was no longer just a former champion. He was a cautionary tale. His name was now synonymous with a specific type of public disgrace. The incident had become a recurring nightmare, ensuring his greatest mistake would be perpetually relitigated in the court of public opinion. His legacy is eclipsed. The 1985 Bob Jones Award winner is now remembered for the joke. The man who achieved one of the rarest feats in golf, winning the Masters on his first attempt, is now inextricably linked to controversy at that very same tournament. The iconic image of him waving a white towel in good-natured surrender has been supplanted by the ugly image of him snapping his fingers after delivering a poisoned joke. Years later, he called it a joke that went bad and said, "I paid my dues." This perspective suggests he never fully grasped the gravity of his offense. By framing himself as the primary victim, he presented a narrative that stood in stark contrast to the public's understanding. He saw a personal misfortune. The world saw a moment of profound cultural ignorance. This disconnect ensures the stain on his legacy will likely never fade. The story of Fuzzy Zoller is a profound cautionary tale. His career serves as a stark lesson that a lifetime of achievement, goodwill, and adoration can be undone in a matter of seconds. Zoller had 2 major championships, a reputation for unparalleled sportsmanship, and the love of millions. But he was a relic of an older, more insular culture. He was woefully unprepared for the shift Tiger Woods represented. His joke was the product of a homogeneous environment where such stereotypes could be uttered without consequence, because the world outside that bubble was rarely listening. But in April 1997, with Woods' historic victory, the world was suddenly paying rapt attention to golf. Zoller's downfall was a direct consequence of his inability to recognize that the rules of public discourse had fundamentally changed. He was a man out of time. He paid the price for it. The ultimate tragedy is that he lost control of his own story. He will never be remembered primarily as the whistling folk hero from Indiana who waved a white towel and won a green jacket. Instead, he is frozen in time, forever the man who told a poisoned joke at the precise moment the world was finally ready to listen and to condemn. His name is no longer synonymous with sportsmanship. It is a byword for a career-defining blunder, a cautionary tale whispered on the fairways for generations to come. What do you think was the biggest factor in Zoller's downfall? Was it the joke itself, or was his career already over? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the tragic fates of sports legends.
65 at the end of the year. I just figured it was a good time to step away and go do something else. I won't be stepping away from the game, just dropping the mic or dropping the headset.
For these last 19 years and 30 years overall in the business, a legend. We love you.
Thank you. At 65, Ian Baker Finch should be celebrating a life well lived. Instead, the Australian golf legend faces a reality far removed from the glory he once knew. The man who conquered the oldest major championship in golf now lives with the haunting memories of one of the most devastating collapses the sport has ever witnessed. This is not just a story about losing form. This is about a champion who lost himself.
Back in 1991, Baker Finch stood on top of the golfing world. He had just won the Open Championship, cementing his place among the elite. He reached number 10 in the world rankings and looked destined for even greater things. The future seemed limitless. But what followed was not the sustained success everyone expected. Instead, it was a descent into darkness so profound that Baker Finch himself admitted he went mad trying to escape it. The problem started almost immediately after his triumph. Winning a major championship should have been the beginning of a golden era. For Baker Finch, it became the weight that crushed him. He felt an overwhelming pressure to maintain that level of perfection every single time he stepped onto a golf course. The expectation was impossible, yet he placed it entirely on himself. He believed he had to play like a champion all the time, and anything less was failure. This mindset became toxic. The year after his Open victory, Baker Finch still managed some respectable results. He finished tied for 6th at the Masters and tied for 13th at the US Open. He even won a tournament in Australia, but none of it brought him joy. He looked at his performances with disgust. He considered the entire year a failure. Think about that for a moment. A golfer who won a tournament and had top 15 finishes in major championships viewed himself as a failure. That level of self-criticism is not normal. It is destructive. The mental pressure started to manifest physically.
Baker Finch developed what golfers call the yips. But his yips were not the typical kind that affect putting. His affliction attacked his full swing, particularly with the driver off the tee. Imagine standing on a tee box, knowing you need to hit a fairway, and your body simply refusing to cooperate. The harder you try to control it, the worse it gets. That was Baker Finch's nightmare, and it played out in front of crowds, on television, week after week. His coach David Ledbetter watched in disbelief as one of his most talented students unraveled. Ledbetter had worked with the best golfers in the world, but he had never seen anything like this. The rise had been spectacular. The fall was even more dramatic. Few athletes in any sport have experienced such a complete reversal of fortune in such a short time. One moment, Baker Finch was competing with the best in the world. The next moment, he was reduced to a quivering mess who worried about missing the ball completely. The transformation was not gradual. It was shockingly fast. This was not an aging athlete slowly losing his edge. This was a golfer in his prime being destroyed by his own mind. The speed of the collapse made it even more terrifying. If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. That realization sent shockwaves through the professional golf community. Now, before we go deeper into this story, I need you to do something. If you have ever felt the pressure of expectations crushing you, or if you have watched someone you care about struggle with their mental health, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below telling me about a time when pressure got the best of you, because what happened to Baker Finch is not just about golf. It is about the human mind under extreme stress, and we can all learn from it. The numbers from Baker Finch's decline are almost unbelievable. By 1995, he had missed 32 consecutive cuts on the PGA Tour. 32 straight tournaments where he could not even play well enough to compete on the weekend. For a major champion, this was unthinkable. But the statistics only tell part of the story. The real tragedy was what was happening inside his head. Baker Finch worked with psychologist Bob Rotella, one of the most respected minds in sports psychology. During their sessions, Rotella asked Baker Finch to do a simple visualization exercise. He wanted him to picture himself hitting a fairway. Baker Finch could not do it. The mental block was so severe that he could not even imagine success anymore. His brain had been rewired by anxiety and fear. Every time he stood over the ball, all he could see was failure. The fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Baker Finch would have nightmares about hitting terrible shots in front of golfing legends. In one dream, he hit the ball out of bounds at St. Andrews while Arnold Palmer watched. Those nightmares eventually came true in real life. The anxiety had become so deeply embedded in his nervous system that it controlled his body. His hands would shake, his breathing would quicken, and his swing, once smooth and automatic, became a conscious effort that fell apart under pressure. In 1997, Baker Finch returned to Royal Troon for the Open Championship. This was the same course where he had triumphed 6 years earlier. It should have been a moment of reflection and pride. Instead, it became the most humiliating day of his career. Baker Finch shot a score of 92. 92 at a major championship, at the very place where he had won. The round made everything that came before feel like nothing. His nerves were completely shattered. He described himself as a frayed knot, barely holding together. Fellow golfer Payne Stewart, who later died tragically in a plane crash, witnessed Baker Finch's suffering up close. The two men stood together and wept. Stewart hated seeing good people suffer, and he could see that Baker Finch was drowning in his own mind. It was not just about golf anymore. It was about a man who had lost lost his identity and did not know how to get it back. Baker Finch did not give up without a fight. In fact, his persistence in trying to fix the problem may have made things worse. He consulted more than 30 different professionals: coaches, psychologists, hypnotists, nutritionists, healers, gurus, swing doctors, and spiritualists. He tried everything, and nothing worked. The technical coaches focused on fixing his swing mechanics, but the swing was not the problem. The swing was just a symptom. The real issue was neurological. His brain could no longer trust his body to execute the automatic movements that make a golf swing work. Every technical adjustment only added more conscious thought to a process that needs to be unconscious. The more he thought, the worse he got. The psychological interventions also failed. Hypnosis could not reach deep enough. Therapy could not undo the trauma. The fear had embedded itself so completely into his motor memory that traditional methods were useless. When you cannot even visualize success, how can you possibly achieve it? The anxiety had taken over. Desperate for answers, Baker Finch turned to alternative methods. He met with spiritual healers and gurus, hoping they could unlock something inside him that conventional methods could not reach. But even these efforts led nowhere. The sheer number of different approaches he tried suggests a man in complete desperation. And that desperation likely made things worse. Each failed attempt reinforced the belief that he was broken beyond repair. Think about what that does to a person. You wake up every day knowing that you used to be great. You have the trophy sitting at home proving you conquered the best golfers in the world. But now you cannot even hit a fairway. You have tried everything and nothing works. How do you keep going?
How do you face another day knowing that failure is waiting for you?
Baker Finch kept playing, but his competitive career was already over. The psychological damage was too severe. In 1998, after the nightmare at Royal Troon and countless missed cuts, he announced he would stop playing tournament golf until at least the year 2000. He needed to step away, not because his body was broken, but because his mind was. The decision to walk away was the beginning of his recovery, but it did not feel like recovery at the time. It felt like surrender. Baker Finch had to accept that he would never be the golfer he once was. The yips had stolen that from him permanently. The man who won the Open Championship was gone, and he was not coming back. So what do you do when the thing that defined you is taken away? How do you rebuild your life when your identity has been destroyed? For Baker Finch, the answer came from an unexpected place. He could not play golf anymore, but he still understood the game better than almost anyone. He knew the strategy, the mental challenges, the pressure, and he could communicate all of that to an audience. Baker Finch transitioned into broadcasting. He became a golf commentator, offering analysis and insight during televised tournaments. This was not an easy shift. Broadcasting requires a different skill set. You have to be articulate, engaging, and knowledgeable. You have to make complex ideas simple, and you have to do it live, with no second chances. But Baker Finch was good at it. Really good. He joined CBS as a color commentator and spent 19 years in the booth. 19 years. That is longer than many professional playing careers. He became a respected voice in the sport, known for his thoughtful analysis and genuine love of the game. Other networks, including NBC and Golf Channel, also sought his expertise. He built a second career that had nothing to do with his physical ability to play. Instead,
It was built on his intellectual understanding and his ability to connect with viewers. Baker Finch's broadcasting success was not just about finding a new job. It was about reclaiming his sense of self-worth. He learned to separate his value as a person from his ability to hit a golf ball. That separation was critical. It allowed him to heal. He no longer needed to be the champion golfer. He could be Ian Baker Finch, the broadcaster, the analyst, the storyteller, and that was enough. In August of 2025, Baker Finch announced his retirement from broadcasting. His final call was at the Wyndham Championship for CBS. The golf world paid tribute to him in a way that felt like redemption. During that final telecast, something remarkable happened. Jim Nantz, the iconic voice of CBS Golf, is known for his signature closing calls. He has called countless champions home with his memorable phrases. But on this day, Nantz stepped aside. He gave Ian Baker Finch the honor of calling the final putt. Cameron Young sank the winning putt, and it was Baker Finch's voice that captured the moment. This gesture was more than just professional respect. respect. It was symbolic. Baker Finch's competitive career had ended in humiliation with that 92 at Royal Troon, but his broadcasting career ended with honor, with his peers recognizing his contributions and giving him the most prestigious moment a broadcaster can have. It was a complete reversal of the narrative. The man who could not finish a round without falling apart was now being trusted to finish the broadcast in style. If this story has moved you in any way, take a second to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because Baker Finch's journey is proof that failure does not have to define you. Your darkest moment does not have to be your final chapter. Baker Finch did not stop at broadcasting. He began sharing his story as a keynote speaker. He talks about mental health,
about dealing with massive failure, and about finding new purpose when your original dream dies. His message resonates because it is real. He is not someone who read about failure in a book. He lived it. He felt the crushing weight of expectations. He experienced the humiliation of public collapse, and he survived. In June of 2025, Baker Finch released an authorized biography titled Ian Baker Finch, To Hell and Back. The title says it all. This was not a sanitized version of his career. It was the raw, honest truth about what he went through. The book details the psychological torment, the failed attempts to recover, and the eventual path to redemption. It solidifies his public narrative as a story of resilience. He went to hell and he came back, not as the golfer he once was, but as something different, something perhaps more valuable. Baker Finch now uses his experience to help others. He speaks to corporate groups, sports teams, and anyone struggling with the pressure to perform. He understands what it feels like to believe you are broken. He knows what it is like to try everything and still fail, but he also knows that failure is not the end. It is just a chapter. And if you can survive it, you can build something meaningful on the other side. His story has become particularly important in modern sports culture. Athletes today face pressures that previous generations never experienced. Social media amplifies every mistake. The scrutiny is constant and unforgiving. Mental health struggles among professional athletes are finally being discussed openly. Baker Finch was ahead of his time in that regard. He suffered through his breakdown when talking about mental health was still taboo. His willingness to share his experience now helps break down those barriers. Young athletes hear his story and realize they are not alone. They learn that asking for help is not weakness. They understand that struggling does not make you a failure. The lessons from Baker Finch's story are universal. First, the pressure we place on ourselves can be more destructive than any external pressure. Baker Finch was not pushed into madness by the media or by fans. He did it to himself. He created an impossible standard and then tortured himself for not meeting it. That kind of self-criticism is toxic. It destroys confidence and creates anxiety. And once anxiety takes hold, it is incredibly difficult to break free. Second, intervention strategies only work if they address the root cause. Baker Finch tried 30 different methods, but none of them worked because they were treating symptoms, not the disease. The yips were not the problem. The yips were the result of the problem. The real issue was the neurological and psychological trauma caused by unrelenting fear and pressure. Until that trauma was addressed, nothing else mattered. Third, sometimes the only way to recover is to walk away. Baker Finch could not fix his golf game while he was still playing competitively. The environment itself was toxic. Every tournament reinforced the fear. Every bad shot confirmed his worst beliefs about himself. Walking away was not weakness. It was the only path to healing. It gave him the space to rebuild his identity without the constant pressure of competition. Fourth, identity transference is possible. Baker Finch was able to find fulfillment in a new career because he stopped tying his self-worth to his physical performance. He learned that he had value beyond his ability to play golf. That realization was transformative. It allowed him to succeed in broadcasting and speaking, and it gave him the peace that eluded him during his playing days. Finally, redemption is possible. Baker Finch's story could have ended with that 92 at Royal Troon. It could have been a tragic tale of a champion destroyed by his own mind. But it did not end there. He found a new path. He built a new career. He earned the respect of his peers.
And he used his experience to help others. That is redemption.
At 65, Ian Baker Finch does not live a lonely, tormented life. That is not the end of his story. Yes, he went through hell. Yes, he suffered in ways most of us cannot imagine. But he came out the other side. He found peace. He found purpose. And he found a way to turn his greatest failure into his greatest lesson. That is not tragedy. That is triumph.